Thank you. Good morning. We're starting over again. That sound is really booming. Yes, it is. Anyway, what I was talking about was we're involved in a world awakening. More and more people are becoming aware of the story we've been given throughout the ages isn't necessarily so, and maybe there's a better interpretation of things. So Madeline in her meditation talked about the gift that we're given, and the gift that we're given is already there. It's a fascinating thing, and I'm going to talk about what Jesus said, and then we're going to bring in some of the metaphors that are in the Old Testament. Matter of fact, what I'm going to talk about is Cain and Abel. Again, for those folks that haven't been with us before, in Unity, we believe the Bible is a story, and it's in metaphors. So it's a progressive story about the consciousness of man and man's rise to who they really are, which is the kingdom of heaven is within, which is what Jesus said. So in looking at what Jesus said, I call it the Jesus Code, and looking into the Bible, and by the way, I use a Lamsa version of the Bible, which is translated from the original Aramaic, so that the idioms and things that were spoken back 2,000 years ago are translated into today's world. And Jesus says so many things, it's absolutely amazing. So we're going to talk about, anyway, where did I put them? I know, I just had them. There they are.
Surprise.
So good.
Mine do that too.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, in John, it says, truly, truly, I say unto you. Now, this is John 14:12. Truly, truly, I say unto you, and this is Jesus speaking. Everybody got it? Which is probably one of the greatest master teachers in the world, in the history of the world. And we attribute him as the Son of God, but we also say everybody else is a child of God. Everybody do that? Because the Bible says that. So it says here, truly, truly, I say unto you, he who believes in me, and what that means is understands the teachings that I have shared with you. And then it goes on and says, shall do the works that I do, and even greater than these things shall ye do. Because I'm going on to my Father, and it's unsaid, I'm leaving you in charge of the world. Isn't that interesting? So each one of us is a child of God. And as a child of God, what does that mean? Everything that God has within itself as spirit is part of what we express individually. So that's a gift. Everybody there? Now, if I really believe that, what would life be like? And how come the words of Jesus now have been overwritten with so many other things that kind of detract from those words? It's really fascinating. It really is. And if you go into I'm going to go into Cain and Abel now. I was going to wait a little bit, but the story of Cain and Abel is kind of interesting because it really is a metaphor. And the story is basically Abel was the firstborn, and he was a shepherd, took care of sheep. And Cain was the secondborn, and Cain was a plowman or a farmer. And in chapter 4, it talks about that Cain brought his offering to God, and Abel brought his offering to God. And it says, now, I'm not going to explain because I don't know. There's a metaphor there, and it would take some research. But if you really understand what he said was, what God told Abel was that his offering was preferred over the offering of Cain. Okay? Now, the idea of jealousy and upset took Cain over, and the Bible says that Cain slew Abel. Okay, one of the famous stories of the Bible. Now, again, we've got to look at it from a metaphysical standpoint. Please understand that Cain is the representative in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, okay? And in there, Cain is the physical aspect of who we are, the material being. And Abel, guess what? Represents the mental or the spiritual side of things. Anybody see the metaphor yet? Mm-hmm. That what has occurred is the physical side has taken over our spiritual side, and it is running us. And we're still living with that in our DNA transferred down for generation after generation after generation. Now, we know now, and there's a lot more in epigenetics, science is saying that DNA is transferred from generations down. And somebody that my great-great-grandfather had a traumatic experience, that was in his DNA, so it came down to me. So we are dealing with hundreds of generations of DNA upsets and beliefs that we are now living through in our physical world. Isn't that nice to know? And then you wonder why the world is where it is. Okay, now, the Jesus code is keeps saying over and over again, there's some ways. Now, number one, we're going to go back. Okay? And by grace you're saved by faith, that not of yourselves. It also says that these things I do, ye shall do, and even greater things. And then in Luke, we got to look at Luke. In Luke, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's Luke 17. Hold on. There it is. Luke 17:6. He said to them, if you have faith, even as a grain of mustard seed, you could say that this mulberry tree. Now, in another gospel, it says, move a mountain. But in this one, it says, say to the mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Anybody you see that visual idea that you have the power with faith to create a change in nature, okay? So where, with all these gifts we have, and again, we're told, these things I do, you shall do even greater things. And the question becomes for me, honestly, how come I'm in a situation where it ain't working? And I use the word ain't on purpose. Now, what's fascinating is if you take a look at it, and if you try to translate it into today's world, the mustard seed was one of the smallest known things at that time. Has anybody ever seen a mustard seed? It's literally smaller than a grain of sand. So Jesus, in his metaphor, was looking for something to give the people. Now keep in mind, people 2,000 years ago, they were illiterate. They were not able to read and write. So the oral conversation was the most important part of transferring of knowledge, and it had to be done in terms and words and pictures that they understood. So a mustard seed is the smallest possible thing, and the mustard seed actually grows into a big bush or a tree. So the metaphor is amazing. One of the smallest things available in consciousness, that's all you need in faith in order to make this whole thing work. Now, what would be the smallest thing in today's world? You have to go into quantum physics, right? And they talk about what, quarks? And you know what the smallest thing is now? They don't even find it yet. What is it? The Higgs particle? Yes? So in today's world, we're talking about a new idea. Now, what's fascinating is that Jesus said, by their thoughts ye shall know them, by what is on the outside, by their fruits ye shall know them. So what's fascinating, if you really take a look at it, quantum physics has now proven that our thoughts change matter. Right there? And if you get involved in the entanglement theory, that when things come together, they never go apart. So there's all these new quantum physics ideas that are proving Jesus' ideas that he talked about 2,000 years ago. Now, how come it's so difficult for us and we have so many warring ideas? I mean, there's folks in the room that want this, and there's folks in the room that want this. And all you have to do is talk about politics and everybody gets upset, no matter where they are. And there's certain things you bring up. If we talk about abortion or no abortion, if we talk about guns or no guns, or I'm just bringing things up to stir it up. Everybody there? Because those are huge issues we all get deeply involved in. Now, if you understand that what I think about I create is a basic law, and it's a law that Jesus described, and it's one of the gifts we have been given. And if you go back into the context and understand that all this negative stuff that's talked about is not part of who we are. You know, you're already saved. Aren't you glad to know that? Everybody reach back and pat yourself on the back. Because it says, what? For grace are you saved by faith. And all that, I don't know how far I should go. But anyway, the word hell was translated from Gehenna, And Gehenna was the garbage dump that they burned at night to burn the trash off. Anybody agree? We got to burn some of our trash off once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Those are called negative events. They come up because our thinking hasn't been correct. So here we are looking at, okay, basically we're a child of God, created in the image and after the likeness of God. We have a free gift of salvation. We have this power of the risen Christ within us. It's who we are. How come we have the issues we're dealing with? And how come we can't get together as a society? So there's a very, very interesting conversation. Now, those of you that have been around me for a while know that Matt and I spent a lot of time studying Joel Goldsmith. And Joel Goldsmith was really one of the better teachers and healers, contemporary healers. And he had a very, very interesting comment. And in the article this week, I pulled it out and actually put it in the article. So I'd like to read it because it gives us a key. You ready? It says, now this is Joel talking. Humanly, we have been taught to judge, criticize, condemn anybody, anytime, anywhere for anything that does not fit our own sense of what is right or wrong. Anybody agree with that?
Yes.
We have been trained, and we have been trained to look for the problems. I very openly share with you that I used to do management training all over the world. And one of the things I talked about was getting ready for the problems. You always got to know the problems. Okay? So we're trained. You know, you walk out the door and somebody says, be careful. Okay, Madeline leaves and she's driving somewhere else. Say, drive carefully. What am I expecting? So we've been trained to be on the negative side of things, okay? So anyway, it says, humanly, we have been taught to judge, criticize, and condemn anybody, anytime, anywhere, for anything that does not affect our own sense of what is right or wrong. But in spiritual work, we must change our attitude so that we are never guilty of judging, criticizing, or condemning a person, and I'm going to add thing or event. Instead, we must always recognize the source of whatever appears to be wrong is only the carnal mind, or Paul called it the mortal mind, or the oversoul, or the combined thinking. This week, I think it was in Joel Goldsmith class, we were talking about two different clouds. Out in the universe, if you can think about it, there's a spiritual cloud, which we call God. And the comment has been made, there's a power for good everywhere in the universe. And once we accept that, that's a universal energy. So that's the cloud of God. And in that cloud of God is perfection, joy, peace, happiness, abundance, health, all that good stuff. And then over here, there's another cloud called carnal mind, or ego, or mortal mind, or oversoul. Now, everything that can go wrong is here. Okay? So this is saying, judge not. Everybody there? Now, if you go into the Bible, it says, judge not, lest ye be judged. So let's take a look at that. And that's in Matthew 7:1, if I remember correctly. Okay? Dun, dun. It's right here, I know it is. In Matthew 7:1, it says, judge not that ye may not be judged. For with the same judgment that you judge, you will be judged, and with the same measure with which you measure, it will be measured back to you. Anybody see the issue that we're dealing with? You see, we have all these powers. We are a child of God. You're an expression of the divine. You have capability of bringing all this wonderful stuff into the world, and what are we doing with it? This is where the ego has corrupted our thinking and created an oversoul, or a overriding of our subconscious beliefs, to criticize, condemn, and complain. And if we don't like something because it doesn't fit our picture. Now, what's in our brain? What's in our brain is the stuff we've been conditioned to believe over the years. Right and wrong is fascinating. I always look at it. One of the big examples that I use is go back to the Second World War and become a Japanese pilot. And what is the great glory for a Japanese pilot is what? Kamikaze. To die for the emperor was the highest valued honor in that society. Would you agree it's not in our society? No. But what made the difference? See, it wasn't God, it wasn't devil, it wasn't anything other than somebody's conditioning that this is what I should believe. So we are on opposite sides of political parties, we're on opposite sides of beliefs, we're on opposite sides of everything. And everything we look at is because we are overriding our basic understanding of the Christ within us with our negative thoughts about other people. Isn't it fascinating? So how come we're in this situation? How come there's war? how come there's political parties? How come, one of the famous quotes is, why can't we just get along? Because we look at things differently, and then how do we get out of that trap? See, the kingdom of heaven is within. The law of attraction says what you think about, you create. Everybody there? And the first step to understand is you're a divine being. And what you think about, you create, period. So if you're upset, if I'm upset at Cindy, Cindy doesn't get anything from me. I'm the one that experiences the results of my thoughts about Cindy. Thank you for allowing me to use yours. Okay? Now you go back, and I feel like I'm preaching. You got to be careful. But what I keep looking at is it's so cosmic and simple, and we have layered it with theology and doctrine and all this, intellectual stuff. And it's really very simple. The kingdom of heaven is within. All you need is faith enough of a mustard seed, and you can make commandments to move a mulberry tree from the ground to the sea. And that's not my words, that's if you want to look at it, the greatest teacher that ever lived. And he is saying you have the same powers that he does if we're willing to exercise them in a period of love. So if you really look at what Jesus commandments, Jesus commanded, number one, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind. So, everybody ready? Mm-hmm. That means nothing else. So when we teach meditation, okay, and there's a group of us that spend at least 20 minutes in the morning and at night in centering prayer, which Pat has brought to us. And we're doing more of that, by the way. So that's a direct connection. Now, you notice we do pray. But what's interesting is we don't ask for anything. If you really, really study what Jesus did, and I think we should, he never asked for anything. He gave thanks for things. He gave thanks when he had the fishes and loaves and fishes. He gave thanks that it was multiplied. Okay? His first miracle with the wine, he didn't say anything. He just had them fill the water jugs. And they found out for themselves they had changed the wine. So there was no request, there was thankfulness. So thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind, which means direct connection, which we have direct access. We don't have to go through anybody else. You don't need a minister. Matter of fact, you don't need me. But the kingdom of heaven is within. And you're already there. It's a matter of letting go and making the direct connection. And it takes time to learn how to do that, I admit that. And then thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, which implies what? Number one, you got to love yourself first. Now, if you really believe you're a child of God, who's the greatest person in the world? Come on.
Yeah.
You are. Okay? Now, it's not ego. It's self-worth. The kingdom of heaven is where? Within. See, and it's accepting those basic ideas. Now, is that controversial? Yes. Okay, it's saying I'm an expression of God. And you know what happened to Jesus 2,000 years ago? He said that and he got crucified. So we got to be careful.
Thanks.
Just saying. No, it's a very controversial idea out there. It really is. And people would go nuts. But the idea is, who are we? What have we hidden from ourselves? And what is society and what has happened through the Middle Ages to dumb down the really truth about who we are, so that now we have come into ourselves and it's a new awakening. who's in control of your life? And that's a big question. Who's control of you? Who is control of your life? And who is the master of your life? Is it still your mom and dad, or is it the next door neighbor or an uncle, or is it God? So we all have a direct connection. And then it says, do not judge. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I find myself judging a lot. TV just drives me nuts. I judge all the time. Do you understand just by saying that I'm judging? Because I'm judging the TV. So what am I doing to everybody out there in TV land? So here we are. See, we're in this conundrum and we don't know. It's hidden from us. So I'm asking us, really, what are the big steps? Course in Miracles, the biggest issue is it's either fear or love. And the whole story in the Course of Love and the Course in Miracles is forgiveness. Forgiveness of self first. And I don't know about you, but I've had a lot to forgive myself about. And then forgive thy neighbor and love thy neighbor as thyself. So we seem to have this Jesus code that has been overridden by the world out there, and it sneaks in on us through judging the world around us. Now, if you understand the law of attraction, and this is controversial, if I look at, I'm going to pick on Bruce this time, and if I pick on Bruce and say I don't like such and such, what am I actually creating for myself? And I'm holding Bruce in that belief. Okay, now there's a lot of well-meaning folks that want to go out and save the world because they see problems in the world. And when I have that thought, what am I doing? I'm creating the problems in the world. Mother Teresa, the famous quote, they asked her to march against war, and she said, "Can't do that. I will march for peace if you allow me to, but I will not march against war. Because anything I march against, I'm acknowledging that it's power, and God is the only power in the world. There isn't anything else." So having said that, and what's funny is I'm way off from where I plan to be.
God off.
What?
You're God.
I went God. Okay, but I keep looking at it, and what have I done to create issues in my life? And it's not any one individual thought. Joel Goldsmith also talks about the fact that it isn't anybody's fault that bad things happen. It's that oversoul, it's that carnal mind that's out there, and anytime we connect with it, it sneaks in. Anybody have weaknesses? Certain topics, you bring up certain things, my mind goes, yeah, and then it stays all night, right? You know what I'm talking about? And so those are the sneaky little tendrils that they're called paths in the brain. And what we're saying is, or what I'm saying is, the kingdom of heaven is within. So we have access to God anytime we want to turn around, no matter what the situation is. However, one of the first steps is to clean up our own life and clean up our own thinking. And changing thinking is not easy. That's why it's important, we believe, to have a meditation experience and also to connect directly with God and to hang around people like us. So I appreciate that. The story of Cain and Abel is kind of interesting. And if you look at if you go into the metaphor of the original creation story, Adam and Eve, and I don't know why I'm going here, but I want to do that. The idea of Adam was the original man. Adam was the original physical self. And then Eve came in, and Eve is categorically, metaphorically, metaphysically, the spiritual side of the duo. So that Adam was in the physical, Eve came in and tempted him with a spiritual idea. The tree of knowledge is what? See, a lot of people don't understand that it might not be the fall of man, it might be the rise of man. And I'm bringing this in because I want to work into it metaphysically over the next couple of weeks. So if it is the rise of man, Eve came in and brought the tree of knowledge, and then in Genesis 3 it says, and man became like us. Who is us? So there's a big question mark. I'm leaving with you. And look at this. Ann is smiling. You've been here before. And the whole idea is that we are spiritual beings in a physical body. And the spiritual self is fighting against the physical self to run things in our life. So let's take a chance and let it out. Madeline's comments earlier in her meditation were, it's a free gift. So I'm thankful for that gift. I'm thankful for the gift of you folks. I'm thankful for your love. I'm thankful for this community. This spiritual community is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful gift to me and to the community and to the family. And we're going to build that church down the road. You know we are. There it is there. Isn't that pretty? By the way, I've got new renderings coming, so we'll see how they do. But the kingdom of heaven is within each one of us. The minute we all believe that this world has shifted into God's world, things will change. So thank you for being part of that world. I love you.